Joseph and his brothers. So we just learned about how Jacob he reunited with Esau and they reconciled their differences and they're brothers again. And Jacob received the final blessing from Abraham, so he is going to be the one to enter into God's covenant, basically, to create the nation of Israel. And we also learned that the word Jacob sounds like the word for Israel in Hebrew. So then Jacob, if we remember, with his wife, who was his wife? Rachel? Yeah, his wife is Rachel, right? Yeah. He had two wives named Rachel and Leah. So with his wives, he had 12 sons, and the youngest one was Joseph. And so Joseph was his favorite one, and the other sons were jealous of him. So just keep that context in mind as we're reading. Jacob continued to live in the land of Canaan where his father had lived, and this is the story of Jacob's family. Joseph, a young man of 17, took care of the sheep and goats with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's servants. He brought bad reports to his father about what his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than all his other sons because he had been born to him when he was old. He made a long robe with full sleeves for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved Joseph more than he loved them, they hated their brother so much that they would not speak to him in a friendly manner. One time Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him even more. He said, "Listen to the dream I had. We were all in the field tying up sheaves of wheat. When my sheaf got up and stood up straight, yours formed a circle around mine and bowed down to it. Do you think that you are going to be a king and rule over us?" his brothers asked. So they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of what he said about them. Then Joseph had another dream and told his brothers, "I had another dream in which I saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down to me." He also told the dream to his father, and his father scolded him. "What kind of dream is that? Do you think that your mother, your brothers, and I are going to come and bow down to you?" Joseph's brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept thinking about the whole matter. One day when Joseph's brothers had gone to Shechem to take care of their father's flock, Jacob said to Joseph, "I want you to go to Shechem where your brothers are taking care of the flock." Joseph answered, "I am ready." His father told him, "Go and see if your brothers are safe, and if the flock is all right, then come back and tell me." So his father sent him on the way to Hebron Valley. Joseph arrived at Shechem and was wandering around in the country when a man saw him and asked him, "What are you looking for?" "I am looking for my brothers who are taking care of their flock." He answered, "Can you tell me where they are?" The man said, "They have already left. I heard them say that they were going to Dothan." So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted against him and decided to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes that dreamer. Come on now, let's kill him and throw his body into one of the dry wells. We can say that a wild animal killed him. Then we will see what becomes of his dreams." Reuben heard them and tried to save Joseph. "Let's not kill him," he said. "Just throw him into the well, into the wilderness, but don't hurt him." He said this planning to save them from them and send him back to his father. When Joseph came up to his brothers, they ripped off his long robe with full sleeves. Then they took him and threw him into the well, which was dry. While they were eating, they suddenly saw a group of Ishmaelites traveling from Gilead to Egypt. Their camels were loaded up with spices and resins. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain by killing our brother and covering up the murder? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, then we won't have to hurt him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brother agreed, and then some Midianite traders came by, and the brothers pulled Joseph out of the well and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. When Reuben came back to the well and Reuben is the oldest one. When Reuben came back to the well and found that Joseph was was not there, he tore his clothes in sorrow. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is not there. What am I going to do?" Then they killed a goat and dipped Joseph's robe into the blood. They took the robe to their father and said, "We found this. Does this belong to your son?" He recognized it and said, "Yes, it is his. Some wild animal has killed him. My son Joseph has been torn to pieces." Jacob tore his clothes in sorrow and put on a sackcloth. He mourned for his son for a long time. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "I will go down to the world of the dead, still mourning for my son." So he continued to mourn for his own son Joseph. Meanwhile in Egypt, the Midianites had sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of the king's officers, who was the captain of the palace guard. Okay, so I am going to skip over chapter 38 because it's a different story, and I'm just going to go into chapter 39. And it's a pretty intense story to read, so if you want to read it, you can read it by yourself, but I'm just gonna, for this live, I'm gonna skip over it. Now the Ishmaelites had taken Joseph to Egypt and sold him to Potiphar, one of the king's officers who was the captain of the palace guard. The Lord was with Joseph and made him successful. He lived in the house of the Egyptian master who saw that the Lord was with Joseph and had made him successful in everything he did. Potiphar was pleased with him and made him his personal servant, so he put him in charge of his house and everything he owned. From then on, because of Joseph, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian and everything that he had in his house and in his fields. Potiphar turned over everything he had to the care of Joseph and did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Joseph was well built and good looking, and after a while his master's wife began to desire Joseph and asked him to go to bed with her. He refused and said, "Look, my master does not have to concern himself with anything in the house because I am here. He has put me in charge of everything he has. I have as much authority in this house as he has, and he has not kept back anything from me except you. How then could I do such an immoral thing and sin against God?" Although she asked Joseph day after day, he would not go to bed with her. But one day when Joseph went into the house to do his work, none of the house servants were there. She caught him by his robe and said, "Come to bed with me." But he escaped and ran outside, leaving his robe in her hand. When she saw that he had left his robe in and had run out of the house, she called to her house servant and said, "Look at this. This Hebrew that my husband brought into the house is insulting us. He came into my room and tried to be with me, but I screamed as loud as I could. When he heard me scream, he ran outside, leaving his robe beside me." She kept his robe with her until Joseph's master came home. Then she told him the same story. "That Hebrew slave that you brought here came into my room and insulted me. But when I screamed, he ran outside, left his robe beside me." Joseph's master was furious and had Joseph arrested and put in the prison where the king's prisoners were kept, where he stayed. But the Lord was with Joseph and blessed him so that the jailer was pleased with him. He put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and made him responsible for everything that was done in the prison. The jailer did not have to look after anything for which Joseph was responsible, because the Lord was with Joseph and made him succeed in everything he did. Sometime later, the king of Egypt's wine steward and his chief baker offended the king. He was angry, and these two officials and put them in prison in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same place where Joseph was being kept. They spent a long time in prison, and the captain assigned Joseph as their servant. One night there in prison, the wine steward and the chief baker each had a dream, and the dreams had different meanings. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were upset. He asked them, "Why do you look so worried?" They answered, "Each of us had a dream, and there is no one here to explain what the dream means." Okay. "It is God who gives the ability to interpret dreams," Joseph said. "Tell me your dreams." So the wine steward said, "In my dream there was a grapevine in front of me with 3 branches on it. As soon as the leaves came out, the blossoms appeared and the grapes ripened. I was holding the king's cup, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into the cup and gave it to him." Joseph said, "That is what it means. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days the king will release you, pardon you, and restore you to prison. You will give him his cup as you did before when you were his wine steward. But please remember me when everything is going well for you, and please be kind enough to mention me to the king and help me get out of the prison. After all, I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here in Egypt, I didn't do anything to deserve being put here. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation of the wine steward's dream was favorable, he said to Joseph, I had a dream too. I was carrying 3 bread baskets on my head. In the top basket there were all kinds of baked goods for the king, and the birds were eating them. Joseph answered, This is what it means. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days the king will release you and have your head cut off. Then he will hang your body on a pole, and the birds will eat your flesh. On his birthday, 3 days later, the king gave a banquet for all of his officials. He released his wine steward and his chief baker and brought them before his officials. He restored the wine steward to his former position, but he executed the chief baker. It all happened just as Joseph had said, but the wine steward never gave Joseph another thought. He forgot all about him. After 2 years had passed, the king of Egypt dreamed that he was standing by the Nile River, when 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the river and began to feed on the grass. Then 7 other cows came up. They were thin and bony. They came and stood by the other cows on the river bank, and the thin cows ate up the fat cows. Then the king woke up. He fell asleep again and had another dream. 7 heads of grain, full and ripe, were growing on one stalk. Then 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the desert wind, and the thin heads of grain swallowed the full ones. The king woke up and realized that he had been dreaming, and this morning he was worried. So he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. He told them his dreams, but no one could explain them to him. Then the wine steward said to the king, I must confess today that I have done wrong. You were angry with the chief baker and me, and you put us in prison in the house of the captain of the guard. One night each of us had a dream, and the dreams had different meanings. A young Hebrew who was there with us, a slave of the captain of the guard, we told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us. Things turned out just as you had said. You restored me to my position, but you executed the baker. The king sent for Joseph, and he was immediately brought from the prison. After he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came into the king's presence. The king said to him, I have had a dream, and no one can explain it. I have been told that you can interpret dreams. Joseph answered him, I cannot, your majesty, but God will give a favorable interpretation. The king said, I dreamed that I was standing on the bank of the Nile when 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the river and began feeding on the grass. Then 7 other cows came up which were thin and bony. They were the poorest cows I have ever seen anywhere in Egypt. The thin cows ate up the fat ones, but no one would have known it because they looked just as bad as before. Then I woke up. I also dreamed that I had 7 heads of grain which were full and ripe, growing on one stalk. Then 7 heads of grain sprouted thin and scorched by the desert wind, and the thin heads of grain swallowed the full ones. I told the dreams to the magicians, but none of them could explain it to me. Joseph said to the king, The 2 dreams mean the same thing. God has told you what he is going to do. The 7 fat cows are 7 years, and the 7 full heads of grain are also 7 years. They have the same meaning. The 7 thin cows, which came up later, and the 7 thin heads of grain scorched by the desert wind are 7 years of famine. It is just as I told you. God has shown you what he is going to do. There will be 7 years of great plenty in all the land of Egypt. After that there will be 7 years of famine, and all the good years will be forgotten, because the famine will ruin the country. The time of plenty will be entirely forgotten, because the famine which follows will be so terrible. The repetition of your dream means the matter is fixed by God. and that he will make it happen in the near future. Now you should choose some man with wisdom and insight and put him in charge of your country. You must also appoint other officials and take a fifth of the crops during the 7 years of plenty. Order them to collect all the food during the good years that are coming and give them authority to store up grain in the cities and guard it. The food will be a reserve supply for the country during the 7 years of famine, which are going to come on Egypt. In this way, the people will not starve. Okay, I'm just gonna finish the chapter and then I'll come back later. The king and his officials approved this plan, and he said to them, "We will never find a better man than Joseph, a man who has God's Spirit in him." The king said to Joseph, "God has shown you all this, so it is obvious that you have greater wisdom and insight than anyone else. I will put you in charge of my country, and all my people will obey your orders. Your authority will be second only to mine. I now appoint you governor over all Egypt." The king removed from his finger the ring engraved with the royal seal and put it on Joseph's finger. He put a fine linen robe on him and placed a gold chain around his neck. He gave him to the second royal chariot to ride in, and his guards of honor went ahead of him and cried out, make way, make way." And so Joseph was appointed governor over all Egypt. The king said to him, "I am the king, and no one on all Egypt shall so much as lift a hand or a foot without your permission." He gave Joseph the Egyptian name Zephanath Paneah, and he gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, a priest in the city of Heliopolis. Joseph was 30 years old when he began to serve the king of Egypt. He left the king's court and traveled all over the land. During the 7 years of plenty, the land produced abundant crops, all of which Joseph collected and stored in the cities. In each city he stored the food from the fields around it. There was so much grain that Joseph stopped measuring it. It was like the sands of the sea. Before the years of famine came, Joseph had 2 sons by Asenath. He said, "God has made me forget all my sufferings and all my father's family," so he named his first son Manasseh. He also said, "God has given me children in the land of my trouble," so he named his second son Ephraim. The 7 years of plenty that the land of Egypt had enjoyed came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began. Just as Joseph had said, there was famine in every other country, but there was food throughout Egypt. When the Egyptians began to become hungry, they cried out to the king for food. So he ordered them to go to Joseph and to do what he told them. The famine grew worse and spread over the whole country, so Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. People came to Egypt from all over the world to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. So Joseph really was a prophet. He could interpret the dreams from God. And believe it or not, guys, there's only 8 chapters left. And then we will have read all of Genesis, which is a big deal. Like, even it's a lot of people know these stories, especially the ones in Genesis and Exodus, but to read through them and really analyze them and think about them is really important. So if you've been accompanying me in this Bible journey, it's really a special thing to do, to spend time with it and think about it. And it will make your life better too, if you just have something to think about, even if you don't believe it, to just think about the story and think about how it's relevant today. So yeah, I'll continue later, and hopefully next time we can finish Genesis.